And action. Okay. So I'm going to measure where this curve comes down and kind of stops and flattens out, which is subtle on this piece, which is going to be right about there. Yeah, it could be a little wider maybe, right about there. So that's where it kind of flattens out. It's still rounded after that. It might even go a little narrower. Who knows? I could even go maybe a little bit narrower. But I don't want to go where it really flattens out. I don't want to trim inside that because that's where it's sort of horizontal and it'll want to collapse around the foot. So I want it to be kind of like almost like an arch form going down into the bottom of the foot. All right, so let's see, go dampen the rim just a little bit here. I'll dampen my bat just slightly so it'll stick. Using a plastic bat so it does stick. I don't like to secure things with clay. I don't have to. All right, so I'm gonna put it on there. Underneath a little bowl sandwich here. Flip it over.
Well, you made that look easy.
Yeah, I did.
If you need help, you know, ask a friend. You know, if you can't do that on your own.
What's fun?
Set up.
Phone a friend. Phone a friend. Phone a friend. Who wants to be on there?
That's the part I need to phone a friend. Lining it up. Oh, nice.
All right. Get my tools.
What are we witnessing here?
I'm just gonna trim a big old bowl. All right, so if you're not comfortable with tap centering, what you can do is just take a tool, hold on to it, kind of brace your elbows, and find a spot. Actually, let me grab a wood knife or something. You can grab my wood knife, thanks. I'm gonna find a spot where the point kind of comes to the edge, okay? And what I'll do is I'm gonna draw a line so that it goes right to the edge of the piece, okay? And then there's a spot where it's the biggest, right here. You have to make sure that your foot is round. You have to trim it round before you turn it into a bowl so that you can have this round bit on the clay.
So this is your centering.
This is centering if you're uncomfortable tap centering. Okay. I'll probably tap center it also just so you can see that. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push it this distance. Now hopefully the bat doesn't move on the bat pins.
Like you should do half the distance.
It seems like you should do half the distance exactly.
Yeah, that's weird.
But if you do half the distance, it's like that formula 1/x where the line never actually, like the curve never actually meets the either axis. So I have about an 1/8 of an inch there. So I'm gonna look at a spot on the wheel right there. I'm gonna keep my hands on the side. I'm gonna use both thumbs and carefully push it to that spot. If it'll move.
Theoretically, it's stuck down.
Yeah, I waited too long.
That's the problem.
Concern would be the bowl sticking to the bat.
Yeah,
That's what he said.
That's what I want to happen eventually.
Eventually, but it happened too soon.
Oop, a little too far there. Okay. I'm gonna make the line go away.
better already.
And I don't know, it may have pushed it a little bit too far, but you can see it's pretty much there. If I want to fine tune it, I make sure I brace my elbows and just kind of let it kind of run into my tool, and I can push it, kind of center it, put one finger on either end of the line, and then put my thumbs in the middle, and I'll just push it just a tiny bit here. Okay, I'm just using my thumbs to push it. You want to basically just touch all the way around. I mean, I'm pretty close. I might even call that centered. So from there to about here, I guess. Let me see, make sure. There to about there. Okay, center it. Now again, push it just a hair. There. I just pushed it maybe 2 millimeters there. That's touching. It's not touching all the way around, but it's touching equally on both sides of the clay, and the gaps are the same all the way around. So I would call that centered. All right.
If you have, if your bottom is not as even and
Round?
has,
Uh-huh.
it's more lumpy,
Uh-huh.
do you try to even it out? what do you do so you can do what you're doing? You know what I mean?
You just have to sort of
Help it. Yeah.
just sort of try to figure out where, if there is a round spot
Okay.
on the foot, you can use
Use
that,
that. All right.
or use a spot
Right under?
right underneath
Oh,
the
okay,
foot.
you can do that.
That's also
Okay, all right.
a good way to do it.
Okay.
Sometimes if it's a little bit oblong, just make sure it's touching
Each-
equally on both sides of the
I got
clay.
it.
You
Okay.
know, just you sort of have to. Sometimes, if it's not totally round, you just have to sort of
Okay.
eyeball it and
Got
hope
it.
for the best. I know that's probably not the answer that you were looking for. But... All right, I'm gonna put this bucket here, so hopefully it'll sort of catch some of the trimmings. I like to use a lid. If you have like a Snapple cap, I have a Snapple cap that's underneath everything there. If it has the little clicky top, you can put it right side up like this, and then when you push it down, you need to have enough pressure to click down the clicky top. Okay, so either side will work. You might want to put it this way if your foot's maybe a little bit softer. This is actually a more slippery surface, so it just depends on what you're used to. I'm actually used to having it this direction, so I'm gonna just tap center it there. Forgot to mark this. So the outside of my foot should be about there. It looks really wide to me, but so I just kind of put a little mark there. We'll see what it ends up looking like after I actually start trimming it. So I want to press down here as hard as I'm, at least as hard as I'm going to be pressing here. I hold onto my tool like this. I'm not holding onto the end like that. If you want it to chatter, that's how you do it. I don't trim right. So if I don't know if you could hear that, but it's chattering. I have it at a. If you look at the chatter, I have it at 3 o'clock, and I'm not holding onto it very tight. Okay, that's how you make a chatter. Okay, I don't want it to chatter. So what I want to do, instead of having it at a scraping angle, I want it at a cutting angle, which is instead of 3 o'clock, I'm about 4:30, 5 o'clock. And then the angle that this meets the clay is at about 30 degrees or 45 degrees. It'll actually cut the clay off. Okay, and you'll actually get a really nice ribbon of clay. You see that I'm holding onto the tool kind of right next to where it's going to be cutting the clay. I have this pressing on here, and my thumb is extended, and I'm actually holding on, like helping hold onto the tool with my left hand.
Is the tool sharp there?
Super sharp, yeah. If you don't have sharp tools, then sharpen that. So I'm usually pretty aggressive to get the clay to the width that I'm looking for. Try to catch these so I can recycle them later. So I still have a little bit of ways to go to get to my width. There we go. Just about there. I'm gonna leave it just a hair wide because when I do my undercut, it'll go a little bit more narrow. All right, so I use the rounded part to get the bulk clay off of there. Then I'm going to switch and I'm going to actually go straight down to the depth that I'm looking for. You can see I'm holding this just a little bit high like this. I'm not holding it really flat like that. Okay, I'm just going to get to the approximate depth that I'm looking for here. It really helps to have sharp tools. Okay, now I have this weird lump I need to get rid of. Okay, so basically from here to about here, it needs to be a straight line, so I just need to get rid of that. So I'm going to, again, hold it pretty high up. And I'm just going to cut that clay off. Lost a piece down there. I'm going to get rid of just a little bit more clay here. If you have nice sharp tools, you don't have to press very hard on the clay to get a really nice ribbon to come off. I want it to be nice and even. If the shape is right and you don't have too much of a cantilever in your foot, you don't have to leave a bunch of clay for slumping. Like if the curve is right and you could put the foot in the right spot, it shouldn't slump as long as you don't trim it way too thin. All right, there's no shame in trimming the whole thing. Sometimes you can spend, 20 minutes trying to get this outside perfect with a rib, or you can just say, well, I'm just going to trim it later, and then just trim it later and spend 30 seconds getting it there. Let's trim the whole thing. I have a little sand. I must have mixed a little my sanded soda fire porcelain in. This one, I think I remember saying something about that when I was throwing it. So no, I'm at 3 o'clock, but I'm not holding it low to the clay. I'm actually holding it at a little bit of an angle here. So I'm still cutting it off. I'm using my leg for support here so it doesn't bounce around too much. Especially since I can't connect with this other hand over here. All right, so Bison tool goes in its little case. Give it a scrape. I'm sort of introducing a chatter to it by the end of my little tool here. Okay, I don't compress porcelain if it's leather hard. What I try to do is just scrape it to a good shape. If you wet and compress with like a red rib or a yellow rib when it's leather hard like this, so let's say I just wet it and took my yellow or red rib and held it low and compressed it like that, a lot of times you'll get a crack that goes all the way around your foot.
Oops.
With porcelain. You can do it with stoneware. Stoneware is fine. It's not as finicky as porcelain is. Porcelain doesn't like to be compressed after it becomes leather hard. So I just try to scrape, and then I'll go over it with a sponge and smooth it. But I'm gonna try not to compress it. All right, so we're gonna get this back out. I forgot to do my little bevel here. So my little mark is right there. This kind of, just looking at this where this curve kind of comes around and in, that's probably where I would have trimmed it anyway, had I not marked the inside. Because it just seems like a good like a place where that curve kind of comes around. You'll see I'll trim that mark away, and I'm going to come back and make an undercut so that where that mark was right about where that kind of top of the bevel is. And I make my little undercut here. Okay, that's putting that place where the foot actually meets the body of the bowl, right where my mark is. It was, yes. Go back. Make sure we not compress, we're nice and smooth. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just stop the wheel and close my eyes and feel it. If you feel any weird kind of changes in shape, then you can go back and get rid of that. Sometimes your eyes are not going to give you the information that you need. A lot of times, actually. Okay, so I'm going to switch around to holding the tool a little bit differently. I'm going to instead of holding onto the tool like this, I hold on basically to the metal part, or I guess this is carbide, but I'll hold on to the trimming part of the tool. I'll put my other hand right next to it. Index finger is on the tool, and then this is going to be on the clay, and it's going to be cutting a really nice ribbon of clay off of here. I'll just move across. My left hand is kind of keeping the trimmings away from going underneath my right hand as much as possible. And it's really pulling on my tool. Like I'm really pulling back against it. It really wants to grab on. So you just have to make sure you're holding onto the tool really, really tight as you do this. And as you're trimming, one of the things you want to think about is making the inside shape match the outside shape. I don't know if you can hear this. Okay, it'll start to sound like you're tapping on a wet cardboard box. And that's about the thickness that you want. If I were to try to, have my tool at a low angle like this and try to really, scrape the clay off with this tool, I'd probably push right through. When you're thinking about the shape of the interior foot, you're gonna try to make it, fit what you remember the inside to look like, but also you want this to, let's get all these crumbs off here. You want this, if you were to trim this foot off, you want this to sort of blend in to that part. We're not going to trim that off, so we just have to pretend. So the left hand is kind of trapping those trimmings so they're not going underneath my other hand. Starting to sound really nice and hollow. Got a couple trimmings in my flywheel. That's all right. All right, so should have about the same tone. I'm not listening to like the tone of the sound. I'm listening to like, I don't know, the surface sound. If you're thinking of the drum, it's like the sound of the drum head, not the sound that reverberates inside the body of the drum and creates the tone. We're talking about just like the initial sound when the stick hits the drum head. All right, so now I like to, on bowls and things like that, to have this be a little bit curved. So I like to use this part of the tool here, which sometimes can get caught and cause problems. Just gotta hold onto the tool really tight. Try to keep concentration.
Which part of that tool are you using?
I'm using like this part
that
right in
here
here.
part.
It's
Okay.
kind of tricky. Like it can catch and
Yeah.
I don't. They might have it at Blick. They have it. I know they have it at the Elk Grove place. Ceramic Supply.
It's hard to tell online what size they are.
This is the 8R4.
AR4?
8R.
Of course it is.
Okay.
I had to order a couple recently, so I remember. I think it's the 8R4.
And what brand is that now?
Kemper.
I'm sorry?
Kemper.
Kemper.
I ordered some for another place I work at. So come on. All right.
Order one, Kim. You got one from me. I'll give you that.
And go in, scrapey tool, mostly just to get all the crumbs out of there. Do actually need to flatten that just a little bit more. Keep going in to get the crumbs out and making little gouges in there. Great thing about having a really sharp tool, you can go back and just trim the tiniest little amount off of there. And have those little bits stick to it without pushing through. I just feel like I have a weird little thing here. Let me scrape that down a little bit. Looks pretty good. I don't know what I do with my sponge. It's hiding somewhere. See it? Thanks. And with the porcelain, you can go back and sponge it. It's actually what I prefer to do rather than, again, I don't like to compress it because I find that I get surface cracks. Like that crack that kind of goes all the way around. Just like, how the heck did that happen? All right, so there it is. Let's flip this back over. Try not to smash the foot in. Plaster back here. Probably should put a piece of newspaper there, but okay. 1, 2, 3, flip. It's a somewhat wide-footed bowl. It's not a crazy wide foot, but it'd be nice for mixing stuff. Texture?
That's what you,
Oh,
where you
that's-
started with that little bit of chatter.
Yeah, I have to go back and get rid of that.
I didn't think
That
you'd
nice
want
little bit
that.
of texture.
Yeah. Right. You're like, what kind of texture? Wanted or unwanted texture?